Hi, Sian. How are you today?
Hi Jo, I'm good, thanks. How are you?
I'm great, thank you. So we decided to get together, didn't we? Because we were having a long conversation yesterday about all the things that are happening in the world. And we thought it would be really great to record some of our conversations. So we set up a YouTube channel called Be the Change, which is the same name as the awards that we've run in the past. And we thought we'd talk about some of the issues facing us and try and put a positive spin on it. What do you think about that?
Yeah, so the week that we're recording this, it's now Thursday, and the IPCC report came out on Monday, which for those of you that don't know, that is kind of a report by the world's leading scientists on climate that looks at what progress we're making on climate. And it was quite scary reading, I'll be honest. It was nothing, I don't think it was anything really new to people working in this space, but it's obviously the media have run with very apocalyptic headlines. Politicians are now starting to take notice. For me, the report was very hopeful in that it was like, here is the wake-up call, all the action we do now counts, here is what we need to do. But then the kind of narrative that went out there from the media and the politicians was very doom-mongering, I felt. And I think a lot of people had quite a lot of hopelessness and eco-anxiety off the back of that. And one of the key takeaways was that we need to have these conversations and we need to turn it into action. And I just think when you doom monger and you put those fearful images and headlines out there, it triggers our flight or fight response, and then we just don't do anything. So I think it's really important that we have action, solutions focused, positive conversations about this difficult stuff.
No, I agree, and I think it is difficult stuff, and it is something that we need to understand. But for me, I'm the same as you. I looked through the report and I was thinking, this is what we knew. This is what a certain number of people, a lot of people who campaign on this and write on this and speak on climate emergency issues, we knew this. So there's no horrific surprises. I think for me, the challenge is, how do we communicate those major issues to people who are maybe not so aware? I mean, the IPCC actually had a quote which was, "This report is a reality check." And that's how I feel about it. And as you say, the press picked it up very much as something that we should all be frightened about, or maybe even slightly nerdy scientists saying things that doesn't really affect you as individual people. Whereas I think there's a lot of people out there in the world who don't really understand the issues, and also, if they are reading about the issues, they think, oh my God, that's really terrifying. The world's going to burn. It's going to be really, really awful. Whereas, of course, what the report is trying to say, in my understanding, is it's really time to wake up now and make some changes, not just individuals, but also governments and businesses and everybody, to try and steer us in the direction that we want to go. So for me, I think it's about, okay, time to make action now. We can't mess about anymore, not about, oh my God, we're all going to die.
Yeah, and I think the action point there is really kind of the essential piece, because we do need to have action. But for so long, and I have a real bugbear about this, the whole conversation has been dominated by individual actions. So changing your light bulbs, using less plastic, when we all have that awakening to the plastic pollution problem, buying sustainable fashion, like all of these things are so important and we do need to do them. But we also need to look at the root of where that push and that pressure has come from. And actually, the idea of an individualized carbon footprint was invented by BP, one of the biggest oil companies in the world. Like, it was a PR campaign by them. So I think carbon footprints are really useful in terms of being aware of how much carbon our lifestyle is emitting and trying to reduce that where we can. But actually, we can only do so much when the system that we live in is still powered by fossil fuels. And I think what's positive is that the conversation now is shifting back to, well, what are the fossil fuel companies doing? What are the governments doing? How is the system going to change? And actually, we've got a consumer-driven capitalist economy that isn't working. When you look at it, it's not working for the majority of people. We're burnt out, we've got mental health problems, we're exhausted, and it's not working for the planet. We've got pollution and everything else. So we're actually seeing that need to shift. But I think that's where it gets overwhelming for people, because then making that change is bigger than you as one person. You're not completely in control of it. So how do we do that? And it's really good that we're seeing that conversation come to light now.
No, it's really, really true. I mean, when you start looking back at how items are produced and how decisions are made, they're driven by quite a small number of organizations and people who already have lots of money and lots of power. And I'm not sort of into conspiracy theories or anything like that, but it's clear just from recent political events that these people are actually holding things up and delaying things for reasons that really don't make any sense when you think about it logically, because what's the point in having a massive petrol company if, you know, it's causing huge damage to everybody in the world? You know, it's the kind of like people have lost sight of it, and it's taken a sort of direction of its own, but away from what actually makes logical sense. So I think it's something about we need to persuade these people in power that what we want as individuals is that change, and we need to look at making much more systematic change to the way businesses works, society works, consumerism works. You know, people will need to be, well, for me, the main thing, as you well know, is that everybody needs to have a lot less and to manage with a lot less in their lives. We just don't need all the things we have in our lives, but because of our consumerist society, it's continually telling us that we need to buy more to keep the economy going. And that especially happened after COVID, didn't it? As soon as shops are open, everyone go out and buy, kind of save our economy with your wallets and everything. But that's just not the answer. We need to be changing things so that people are having a lot less, managing with a lot less, and we're producing a lot less.
Exactly. And I think what frustrates me is that the government here in the UK constantly tout this line that we are climate leaders. We've massively reduced our emissions in the last few years. But with that figure, they're only counting onshore emissions, and they're only counting emissions now. So they're not taking into account that the Industrial Revolution started in the UK, which obviously then started the whole emissions problem, and they're not taking into account those historical emissions. Then also not taking into account the fact that we have shipped off all of our manufacturing overseas. So our actual carbon footprint is massive, because the emissions are happening in China and India and all of these other places are our emissions, because we're consuming those products. They're being shipped to us, they're being, you know, flown to us, and then we're consuming them. And the manufacturing, those products wouldn't be manufactured if we weren't consuming them. So that should be part of our emissions. But the problem is the government are, you know, Boris Johnson, the Prime Minister, did a video in response to the report that was still very economy focused. He was talking about cash. He was talking completely about what other countries should be doing. You know, now is the time for other countries to show leadership, and now is the time for them to catch up to us. But actually, we need to look at what we're doing, and we need to be realistic about what our carbon footprint is. And it is systemic. You know, it's not a conspiracy theory. There is that report that shows that 71% of all global emissions are caused by 100 companies. Yeah. And I think when that headline comes out, and when we use that, what I find a lot whenever I kind of tweet about that or whatever, people reply to me saying, well, stop buying their products then. They're thinking of companies as the fashion brands or the supermarkets or, you know, Amazon, for example. But actually those companies, those 100 companies, are the big oil companies that are powering everybody else. And we can't stop buying their products because there aren't good alternatives. You know, we have to power our homes somehow, and the system in this country is still powered by fossil fuels. So that's out of our control. So we can stop buying products from Amazon and fast fashion brands and the likes of that, but actually that's not creating that level of systemic change. We need the government to do that. But the problem there is that the government are lobbied by big oil. They've got so much money. And just to pick on him again, but Boris Johnson's leadership bid, when he ran to be the Conservative leader, he had a huge donation from a company that is linked to a climate denial lobby group. So, you know, he's in their pockets, he's financially funded by them, he's being lobbied by them. He's obviously going to make decisions that are in their favour rather than our favour. That's not a conspiracy, that is just follow the money, that's what's going on. So this problem is so much bigger than us as individuals. It is systemic, but we shouldn't let that make us feel like we're powerless and we can't change it. But I think the shift that we need to make is to think as citizens and not just as consumers. This isn't just about the products that we buy. This is about how we vote and, you know, how we campaign for change and what we do.
No, definitely, absolutely. I'm just going back to what you said about international impacts as well. It made me think about rubbish and waste, because not only do we create all of these huge numbers of products and things, but we ship off the waste, we create it abroad, we use it here, and then we chuck everything back over to other countries to dispose of the waste. So it's not just carbon, it's also landfill as well. And talking about as well, you triggered lots of thoughts in my head, Sian. The system, you've got our political system, and you were talking about our fueling system and how our houses work and that kind of thing. I mean, that's the kind of change that has to happen. And if you think about well, electric vehicles is a good example, switching everyone over to electric vehicles. A few years back where we changed from analog to digital TV, these things can happen. So we need to build a home system that works on non-fossil fuels. So electricity is the obvious one. If we can power everything by regenerative power and find ways that works for our homes, then that's what needs to be done. And it's something that we need to encourage building companies and landlords and everybody else to be doing, and make it legislative so that people have to make those kind of changes. But we know we can do it because we've done it before.
Exactly. And I think what is interesting now is that the science community is in almost complete consensus that climate change is human made, it's caused by us. Obviously those humans are the wealthy humans, and comparatively that includes you and I in the developed world, but the kind of 1% that aren't in consensus with that are being funded by big oil. So we can pretty much take it as 100% we know that this is being caused by us, and then it's on us to start reversing it and start changing it and to cut emissions. And we need the political will to do that. So I think the time of climate denial is coming to an end, and we're not going to be seeing that narrative anymore. I mean, we will still see it, but we can kind of dismiss it now as we know that that's not true. We know that this is fact. But the big danger now is the climate delayers, who are going to keep saying that we shouldn't act now because of these various reasons, or will try and make us think that the solutions don't exist. And I think that's one thing that's frustrated me for a long time. When I first came into this space, I was like, this is a massive problem. What do we do about it? I genuinely believe that we just didn't have the solutions yet, and we needed innovation and new technologies. And the billionaires of the world, the Bill Gates of the world, are touting that narrative that the solutions don't exist, but they do. And Project Drawdown is a really good book and TED Talk and group that you can follow that have done the research into that and found 100 viable solutions that would achieve what we need to achieve. So drawdown in terms of not just cutting emissions, but actually drawing down the greenhouse gases that are already in our atmosphere that are causing global heating. So it is possible. We could do it now. Everything is in place in order to do that. It's just that the political will isn't there. And I think what's interesting is what we saw with COVID is how rapidly, if the political will is there, things can change.
Sorry. I completely agree with you. And I think it goes back to that whole behaviour change thing as well. I don't just mean individuals and system behaviour change. It goes back to, the fact that we need to think differently about things. And again, it's the kind of capitalist consumerist model that we work to. It's the same for those kind of solutions as well. So for example, with electric vehicles, battery research didn't happen for 10 years because there wasn't any interest. It wasn't trendy. Didn't seem to be any need for battery research, but then suddenly loads and loads of money's thrown into batteries to try and solve some of the problems. And I think it's the same. The solutions technologically exist, but you need the will to actually make them happen. I mean, COVID vaccine is a great example, isn't it? Suddenly we want to get a COVID vaccine out quickly. We throw the money, the science, the knowledge, and there's no denying that that's an amazing achievement, but we can do it for other stuff if we need to as well. But at the same time, I don't want to think that everything is about technological solutions and science, is it? It's got to be about it's political will, it's also individual will, and it's kind of embracing it. So and COVID is a really good example, because I think for a lot of people, understandably, change is a frightening thing, and it can take a decade maybe for a population to embrace change. But with COVID, because we all understood the science, most people understood the science, understood the reasons for why we had to do what we had to do, and we then embraced it as a community. We will stay home, we will protect our community, our older people, our vulnerable people. Will do that, and we'll look at the science, and they're saying that this is what we need to do. We'll wear masks, that's a huge behavior change, and we'll basically have something put in our arm that most of us have to trust the scientists to say that this is the right thing. So we know that we can do it. And for most people, that was not just acceptable, but that was really wanted, that we would work together to do that. And I believe it's very, very similar. We just need to help people understand in a positive way what the reasons are for why we're doing these things and how we can do this to pull together to save our planet.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think part of the problem is that in the narrative of how this is reported and discussed and, you know, just put out there in the general public understanding of it, there is no alternative. We talk so much about what's going to happen if there's no forests, if the coral is all bleached and the oceans are warmer and the sea levels rise and the land's going to disappear and the wildfires are going to rage, and, you know, all of that real apocalyptic stuff that is terrifying. But we don't talk about what happens if we do achieve the Paris Agreement. What happens if we do stop emissions? What does life look like if we consume less? And at the moment, that idea of consuming less, because we've been all brought up in this capitalist society that attributes our self-worth to the stuff that we own, that feels, the idea of shopping less, buying less, having less stuff feels like a real life of austerity and suffering and, you know, just difficulties. But actually it's not. And the people that do it, you know, if you watch like the Minimalist documentary, for example, they talk so much about mental health and the benefits. If you look at community sharing initiatives and you look, even just go back a few decades, like the sense of community in spaces, you know, I think we all felt that was really lacking during COVID, because we suddenly realised that we don't know our neighbours, we don't know the people on our street, depending on where you live, and we don't have those communities anymore where we can support each other through things. It's all gone online, it's all gone digital, which there's big benefits to. But what we need to do now is say, right, what's the best of all of it? And what do we want to take forward? And what is that positive future going to look like? And I think with COVID, we all had very clearly, this is what we don't want. We don't all want to be stuck at home forever, living in lockdowns, fearing this virus, you know, worrying for the vulnerable in our community, feeling at risk. We don't want that. We want to get back to how life was. But actually we then got a taster of, well, it's quite nice to work from home sometimes and have that flexibility, and it's better for childcare and, you know, all of those kind of things. So now people are looking at, how do I take the positives forward? And I think a lot of people, now that we're sort of coming to a different stage in the pandemic, obviously it's not over, but we're coming to a different stage, a lot of people are thinking about, what do I want to do differently in my life now? What, you know, career changes and changes of purpose and changes of priority and working pace and working life balance and all of the rest of it. And I think we need to go through that mental shift, but actually we need to have the positive conversation about what could life look like in a world that isn't powered by fossil fuels. Yeah, and that can be a really positive thing.
Yeah, and I honestly think there are some positive things that will come out of these changes that we have to make. I mean, health is one. We know that health and obesity and all of those kind of problems that have happened have come along because we have become very sedentary. We get in our fossil fueled cars and we drive to our fossil fueled offices and we work, you know, and we go back home again. And people are stressed and they're not getting enough exercise, they're not getting enough nature, they're not getting enough fresh air. What we learned during COVID is that people really value nature and walking and the countryside, and it's not that long since kids walk to school, we walk to the train station or the bus depot or whatever. So I think our health could really benefit from making these changes, which is a really positive thing. And also the community thing is really, really important. Air pollution, my God, I mean, there was the case where the poor young child in London died from air pollution. As soon as we get rid of fossil fuels in any big way, it's going to be amazing. I mean, we could hear the birds sing, couldn't we, when there weren't so many planes flying over? There's so many positive things here. And I do feel that the media in particular are always talking about tackling climate emergency as a negative, whereas you know, we know we have to do it, there's no choice, we have to do it, but it's actually, there could be some really good things that came out of this, just in the same way as there was with COVID.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think an interesting example of this is the donor economics model. It's a really good book, it's probably in that stack behind me, by Kate Raworth, and that basically looks at reimagining the economy into circular models and into sustainable models for our health, for our well-being, for planetary concerns. And you know, it's about living within the limits of what we've got available so that everybody has enough. And it just makes sense when you read it, you just think this makes total sense and that is how it should should be.
Yeah.
And I think that is a really good step in starting to show what the world should be like. But I think where we've got the problem is the climate has just been its own conversation for so long. And if you look at politicians and political parties, it's still just a piece of their manifesto. They roll it out when things like the IPCC report come out and they start to talk about it, but nobody is really looking at how it embeds in every other element of our lives. You know, it will impact on health, it will impact on care, it will impact on everything else. And for me, you know, I've got a real bugbear about this, Jo, but the thing that kind of epitomizes what we don't want is plastic grass. Now, I live on a new build estate, right? And everybody, there's a company around here that fits it and his business is booming. And I see his van all the time and everybody is shifting their gardens to plastic grass. It's going to cause a massive problem because it increases your flood risk. So it's, you know, and new build estates in particular are designed in a way that eliminates flood risk because of the way they work with the land. And then you go and put plastic grass in and you get water runoff. But bugbear aside, off my soapbox, plastic grass for me just epitomizes this, because when I talk to people about why they are having it fitted, you know, I really want to understand what is the decision process there. The reasons people tell me are, and the reasons that business owners who fit it have told me, one is that elderly people cannot get into their garden and mow their lawn, which you understand. So they get it because it's easier to care for. And the other is that younger people that are having it fitted are too busy to get out there and mow their lawn. And to me, that's just so sad, because why are we not looking after the elderly people in our community? And why isn't a neighbour just nipping around and mowing the grass for them if they are at the point where they can't do that anymore? That's number one. And number two, why are we so busy that we don't have time to do that? And we've got this preconception that we're just running around all the time, we're working long hours, you know, all of that, that we are not caring for our environment and then the benefits that we get back from having a beautiful garden that isn't made of plastic. And I just think that to me does just epitomize what has gone wrong.
Yeah, no, I agree.
What we don't want.
And there's so many things like that. I mean, for me, there's plastic bottles for drinking water is one of my bugbears. So someone said to me the other day, and I love this, you're not buying water, you're buying a bottle. So basically the water isn't costing anything. What you're buying is the bottle and then you chuck it. There's just no excuse for it at all. And then, of course, my main bugbear that you've heard me bang on about those times, polyester clothing. Yeah. I mean, polyester clothing, there's no positives to it apart from you don't have to iron it. And
but that again is a time thing, isn't it? We're too busy to do the ironing and we don't want to do the ironing. And,
exactly. You've got microplastics in there, you've got horrible carbon-based production, you know, made of oil, and you've got the whole cycle of polyester clothing is wrong. And even now, if you don't want the creasing, there's more modern sort of semi-synthetic, whatever you want to call them, like tensile fabrics that feel much better, much more breathable if you really can't face having an iron. And by the way, going back to your gardening thing, one of my university friends who does fit into your category of time poor and all of that, she's bought a little mowing robot that you just put in the garden and it goes around and mows the lawn. So you just, you know, if you really can't face mowing, getting your neighbours to mow the lawn, you get something like that, and then you have real grass and you have insects.
The tipping point for me was when I learned that if you have fake grass, you have to hoover it.
No.
You have to go out with your vacuum cleaner and hoover it. That, to me, I was like, no, I'm out.
Yeah, exactly. I'm out of that one. No, it's mental, isn't it? It's mental. Well, the reason we were doing this podcast was to obviously talk lightly about some of these issues, but I think one of the important things that I know we both feel is it's reaching people, so people don't feel frightened, because the headlines have been very frightening, but we really want people to understand that it doesn't have to be frightening. It just has to be something where we gather together and we talk about action and we take action, and where necessary we lobby the relevant organisations to make sure they're taking action too. So what do you think we can do? I mean, for me, I would say it's got to be around writing to your MP. And the situation we're in the UK at the moment is the majority, unfortunately, of MPs are Conservative and have a very tight whip. But we still have a very important role as citizens to lobby them. So we should be writing to them and emailing them and saying, we care, we really care about this. Please, could you take urgent action on the IPCC report? And in particular, for me, we've got Alok Sharma, who's heading up COP26 in the autumn. he, to me, seems like someone who's really taken on the climate emergency and feels it. However, he's being restricted by his party into saying that he won't condemn the Cambo oil field just off of north of Shetland, which is crazy, because the whole IPCC thing is we have to get rid of fossil fuels and we have to do it now. So, and I truly believe that Alok Sharma, he's convinced me that he believes this. However, he cannot condemn an oil field, which we know makes no sense whatsoever. So we need to write to our MPs and lobby them to encourage them to accept that this is a no-go and they have to get rid of it.
I actually think that's one of the most powerful things you can do, is to make a regular habit of writing to your local representative, so your council as well, because obviously a lot of these decisions will, obviously the big decisions like Cambo and things will be made at a national political level, but smaller decisions about kind of rewilding in your local community, shifting, public transport decisions, making space for slow travel, all of those kind of things will be made, and recycling and everything else will be made at a council level. So I think don't forget your councillors as well, but if you can make it a regular habit to, monthly or fortnightly or even weekly, if you have the time, to send an email, it's relatively easy to do, and once you've got the templates for it, you can do it nice and easily, about the latest concerns that you have. It can feel really futile, because you will probably, especially if you've got a Conservative MP and councillors, you will probably just get fobbed off with platitudes, but that's not really the point. The point is, what if they are getting hundreds of climate related emails every single week? They then will be forced to take action. So it's about individual voices being heard at a mass level. So I think that's really, really important. So definitely agree with that action, Jo. And the one that I would add as like, what can we do now to support that, if you're just kind of coming into this space, you want to take action, to make that task easier, is to join some environmental groups. So you've got Friends of the Earth, you've got Greenpeace, all of these kind of organisations. Surfers Against Sewage are doing some really amazing work on the plastic problem and kind of campaigning for bottle return schemes and things like that. So the easiest thing you can do is find kind of 5 or 10 of them, join their email newsletters and read their emails when they come in, because that's the other thing is, we get overwhelmed with emails and we just delete them, but they will send you petitions you can sign. They will write templates for you that you literally just put your postcode in, it will generate where your MP is, and it will help you write that email for you, and you just need to put your name and address in and off it goes. So it makes that task really quick, and they will keep you up to speed with what's going on, so it doesn't take a big amount of time, because we are all time poor, and the hope is that the system will change and we will all have more time to care for our planet and care for ourselves, but at the moment that's not the reality we live in. So make it as easy as possible for yourself, but make it a regular habit is what I would say.
And also, I think I completely agree with all of that. Local groups, because I know that in our area there's local groups springing up. There's a local Friends of the Earth sort of cell organization, we want to call it. There's Extinction Rebellion if you want to take more action in that, and there's even things that are not affiliated to some of these groups. There's just nice community repair projects where you can go along and get things repaired and meet people who are thinking along the same wavelength as you, so you can learn from them, you can communicate with them, and basically the more people that get involved with all of these things, the more the message will get out there. Because I think that's the important thing, is to not make it this big scary, you have to be an environmentalist who's chaining yourself to buses. It's that this is everyday life, we have to have everyday change. So I definitely agree with that, getting involved in communities. And then my other one would really be, have a little think about all the things you're using in your life, and when you go shopping or however you get your products and items, is think about, do you need it? Think about where it's come from and how it's been made and what's made of. And even more importantly, I think in some ways, what's going to happen to it when you finish with it? What's going to happen to the packaging? What's going to happen to the item? If it's made of plastic, it isn't going to biodegrade. There's lots more, there's choices these days. You can buy things in cardboard packaging that we can recycle. You can grow more, you can get things from farmers markets. Unfortunately, the supermarkets have been slow, in my view, to come on board with all of this. And I know some of them have started refill schemes and things like that, but it's slow and it's small. I mean, really, it's better to support your local shops if you can, and try and say, look, I don't want plastic with that. Can you just put the fruit and vegetables directly into my basket, those kind of things. So I just think it's about thinking a little bit bigger. Do I really need it? if I do really need it, where am I getting it from? How's it been made? And what's going to happen to it at the end of life? And that might seem like a lot, because that consumerist society that we've all kind of got used to makes us think we can just go into a shop and buy whatever we want. And that's a good thing, because that's helping the economy. But actually, it's not a good thing, really. It's not helping the planet. It's not helping the people who are making it. What we really want to move to is a model where goods are minimal, we get what we need, but they're also made properly. The whole life cycle is clean, and the people who are involved in making it are fairly paid and fairly rewarded. So that's what I would say. Have a think about what you're using and buying and how you can do it better.
Yeah, definitely. And I think the note to end on here is that final bit that was in the IPCC report, that every bit of action counts. So don't focus on what you can't do. Don't worry about what you can't do. Just think every single bit of action that we take to reduce our carbon footprints as individuals and as a system and a society, they count and they are really important. So do what you can with what you have, but start now.
Yeah, exactly. And have it to heart. I mean, it's like people who want to take up running, people say, oh, I only ran half a kilometre. You say, that's half a kilometre than you ran if you were sitting on the sofa.
Exactly. Yeah. Oh, it's been great to chat, Jo. This has been really good. I hope that this has inspired people. What we will do is in the section below in the description with this video, we'll link up some of the resources that we've talked about, some of the organisations where you can get started, and just give you a few resources to help you turn this conversation into action.
Definitely. And hopefully we'll come back with some more conversations, maybe bring some experts in who can talk to us a bit more about things we can do. And we'll share all of this with you on YouTube and various other sources, so that you can join in with us and talk about this and turn what might seem scary into something really positive and community filled.
Thanks, Jo.
Thanks, Sian.